Once, in the heart of an ancient African kingdom, there was a prince named Kwasi. Born into wealth and surrounded by opulence, Kwasi had been raised with an unshakable sense of superiority. He believed himself destined to rule and saw the villagers beyond the palace walls as beneath him, considering them little more than unimportant shadows that merely supported his kingdom. He rarely left the confines of the palace, shunning interaction with anyone who was not of noble blood. The prince was known to scowl rather than smile, and his disdain for those who did not share his status was well known. One day, however, fate struck. Kwasi fell gravely ill with an ailment that puzzled all the palace healers. Days turned into weeks as his strength waned, and each healer who tried to treat him eventually failed. Desperation set in across the kingdom, as whispers began to spread that perhaps the arrogant prince's sickness was a punishment sent by the spirits for his pride. His father, the king, grew anxious, fearing not only for his son but also for the future of his kingdom. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky and cast golden hues over the land, an elderly healer came before the king with a suggestion. "There is a young woman in the village," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "Her name is Abeni, and she is known for her gift with herbs and healing. I have seen her save many whom others thought lost." But the idea of summoning a mere villager to the palace stirred the king's pride. Reluctantly, though, he agreed, knowing he could not let pride keep him from attempting to save his only son. Messengers were sent to Abeni's humble home, requesting her presence at the palace. When they arrived, they found her gathering herbs near her small thatched hut, and they delivered their message with urgency. To their surprise, Abeni refused. "I will not enter the palace," she said calmly, a quiet strength in her voice. "If the prince wishes for my help, he must come to me as any other person seeking healing." This was unheard of, the healer demanding that the prince come to her. The messengers returned, shocked and uncertain, relaying her response to the king and the court. Angered at her refusal but left with little choice, the king ordered that Kwasi be carried to Abeni's village. In a curtain litter, accompanied by a retinue of guards and servants, the prince was borne out of the palace for the first time in years, his weakened body cloaked in fine silks. It was the first time he had set foot in the village, and he was taken aback by the simple, bustling life around him. As they reached Abeni's modest hut, Kwasi felt a twinge of irritation. He had never encountered such a person who would refuse the will of royalty. Yet, there he lay, carried on a litter and brought before this humble healer. Abeni, with her calm gaze, met him without bowing, without any sign of reverence for his title. She saw only a man in need of help. She moved to examine him, her hands gentle yet firm, and he felt an unfamiliar sense of humility wash over him under her steady, composed gaze. Abeni was meticulous in her care, spending hours each day preparing medicines from herbs she gathered from the forest. Kwasi watched her as she walked, her movements graceful and assured, a quiet focus in her eyes. He noticed how the villagers would approach her with respect, seeking her help with various ailments, and she would tend to each person with the same dedication, whether they were old, young, wealthy, or poor. Her kindness extended to all, and she treated each person with genuine compassion. Over time, Kwasi's health began to improve under her care. Yet, it wasn't just the medicines that healed him. It was the warmth of Abeni's presence, the kindness she showed without expectation of return, the patience with which she tended to him without judgment. Gradually, the walls of pride he had built around himself began to crack. He found himself speaking to her about his fears, his frustrations, and even his loneliness. Abeni listened without interruption, her gaze calm and understanding. As the days passed, Kwasi felt something new stir within him, a longing he couldn't quite name. He found himself captivated by Abeni's simplicity and strength, her ability to find joy in the smallest of things, and her unwavering commitment to her people. Her laughter was like a balm, her smile a rare treasure he came to look forward to each day. He admired her, yet felt hesitant to express it, his heart weighed down by the guilt of his past arrogance. In the village, there was another who held Abeni dear, Kofi, her childhood friend and confidant. Kofi, a kind-hearted and brave young man, had always been there for Abeni, supporting her in her healing work and sharing her love for the village. They shared an easy friendship, and Kofi's feelings for her ran deeper than friendship, though he had never found the courage to confess his love. As Kwasi's health returned, he began to notice Kofi's closeness to Abeni and felt an uncomfortable pang in his chest. For the first time, the prince knew the bitterness of jealousy. He watched as Abeni and Kofi laughed together, shared stories of their childhood, and exchanged smiles that spoke of a bond built over years. Kwasi, with all his titles and wealth, suddenly felt small and vulnerable, fearing he might lose the only person who had ever stirred his heart. Driven by his newfound emotions, Kwasi decided to approach Abeni one evening. He found her by the river, where she often went to gather her thoughts. The moonlight cast a silver glow over the water, and Abeni looked up as he approached, her face gentle but questioning. "Abeni," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I owe you more than my life. You have shown me a world I never cared to see, and now I cannot imagine it without you. Will you let me walk by your side, not as a prince, but as a man who wishes to earn your heart?" Abeni was silent, her gaze searching his face. She felt a tenderness toward him, a respect for the man he was becoming. But she also knew that a life with Kwasi would mean leaving behind much of the simplicity she cherished, and she was not yet sure if her heart was ready for such a commitment. "Kwasi," she replied, her voice gentle, "your words touch me deeply, but love is a journey, not a decision to be made in haste. Let us continue this path and see where it leads. Perhaps one day, we will find our way to each other." Kwasi nodded, accepting her answer with humility. He understood now that love could not be commanded or possessed, it had to be nurtured with patience and respect. He was willing to wait, to prove himself worthy of her affection. Life returned to normal in the village, with Kwasi gradually finding his place among the villagers. He helped with the harvest, learned to listen to their stories, and offered his strength where it was needed. The people grew to respect him, not for his title, but for his actions. For the first time, he felt connected to something larger than himself, a community bound by shared hardship and joy. But Kofi, seeing Kwasi's devotion, wrestled with his own feelings. Though he cared deeply for Abeni, he could not deny the bond forming between her and the prince. One day, Kofi confronted Abeni, his voice filled with quiet pain. "Abeni, my heart has long been yours. But I see that perhaps it is not meant to be. If you find happiness with him, I will be content, though it breaks my heart." Abeni embraced Kofi, grateful for his honesty. "Kofi, you are dear to me, and I will always cherish our friendship. But matters of the heart are mysterious, and I cannot say what lies ahead. All I know is that you both mean much to me." As time passed, Kwasi's humility grew, his pride replaced by a deep love for the village and its people. One day, he returned to the palace, not to retreat but to take on his duties with renewed purpose. He opened the royal granaries to aid the village in times of need, and he worked to build a bridge between the palace and the people, striving for a kingdom united in spirit. In time, Abeni came to see the sincerity in Kwasi's transformation, and her heart, too, began to soften. She recognized that he was no longer the proud prince she had once turned away, but a man who had found redemption in humility and love. Kwasi and Abeni were eventually married in a simple ceremony attended by villagers and nobles alike. Abeni became the crown princess, beloved by the people for her wisdom and kindness. Together, she and Kwasi ruled with compassion, their love a testament to the power of humility, patience, and true transformation. And so, they lived happily ever after, bound by a love that had grown not from titles or wealth, but from the shared journey of two souls who had learned to walk beside each other as equals, forever changing each other's lives.